What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to your main event of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast for the week. We are talking Mount Rushmore, and we're going to get into explaining what that means in a moment. But first things first, just want to say hello to everybody, and I want us to say hello individually. The panel. That's what we're going to introduce first. I am your host, as always, Tony Mango, and joining me, as always, are the usual suspects here. We've got Robert D. Felice.
Hello.
And Callum Wiggins.
Hey.
So the three of us are going to pick four people, and that is what the Mount Rushmore is. Just four people. Doesn't matter what it is.
Okay,
Yeah, imagine if that was the
Mark
case.
Andrews.
No,
George Washington, Abe Lincoln.
Boo. Now, what we're doing here is the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling. We've done two of these before, one of them being the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling in general, and the other one being Mount Rushmore of women's pro wrestling. And we're going to change it up a little bit here because we could have technically done something like the tag teams or the Mount Rushmore of, Intercontinental Champions or something like that. But since there's been a lot of discussion lately on who is in charge on Monday Night Raw, between Baron Corbin, Alexa Bliss, Kurt Angle, Stephanie McMahon, all these other kind of potentials and stuff like that, now's the best time really than any for us to talk about authority figures. And if you don't know what qualifies an authority figure in this discussion, it's essentially we're going to factor in anybody who had power over Monday Night Raw, SmackDown, 205 Live, NXT, any of those shows. You know, it's not the people that are behind the scenes like Kevin Dunn, for instance. It's the people like the general managers or the commissioners or people that were labeled a sheriff or lieutenant commissioner. We've had people that are interim general managers. We have people that are assistants, but they really essentially serve as like a backup general manager and stuff. So there's a lot of different people, and my list is an impressive amount. I mean, I took down everybody that I could think of that has been in any kind of like capacity other than, one time John Cena gets to call one shot on one show. Well, that doesn't really count and stuff like that. But the people that I do have, there is a list of, I'm double checking right now, 45 people. If you just group together all the guest celebrity GMs and stuff. So there's way more than 50. And that is where we should pretty much start, is we should just start knocking people out that definitely are a no. I would say one name that we need to knock out for sure, just a guaranteed no, is Donald Trump.
If only America would have said the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a no from me.
Yeah.
Obviously going to be a no for me on this Mount Rushmore, the real Mount Rushmore, any other future Mount Rushmore. But I will say, as a 15-year-old, when he hosted Raw that night and it was free, and it was basically like a commercial-free pay-per-view on Monday night, I thought it was pretty cool.
Didn't that cause like WWE stock to take a huge hit when he was named because they WWE do the thing that they always do, which they actually put out an official press release suggesting that Donald Trump had bought the company from Vince McMahon, and the stock prices just tumbled. The same thing they did when they set out a press release saying that Vince McMahon had died.
Ridiculous.
Like,
This company's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And yet America still didn't have better sense nearly 10 years later.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, maybe they looked at that and said, well, if Trump is president, he'll give us no commercials. I think just based off of like bias, we can knock out Willie Gilzenberg and Hisashi Shinma, because when we were discussing this idea to begin with and kind of brainstorming, none of us had any idea who the hell those people were.
Yeah, that gets into a little more like territorial era stuff. So I don't think they're going to make it on this Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a little bit of digging, as I tend to do in these situations. The Gilzenberg one, he seems to be a guy that was actually as close to a real president in WWF at the time as any of these people probably was. in terms of the fact that he actually handled a lot of the actual management of the company alongside Vince McMahon. So even though the title was given to him quite ceremonially, he still actually did a lot of like running of the company, probably more so than any other quote unquote president besides Vince McMahon. So I think he deserves at least again, he won't make it onto the actual Mount Rushmore, but like a little tip of the cap to him for actually doing a job that was important to WWE at the time.
More so. Go ahead.
There's one more name on this list that will kind of fit that description, and we'll get to him later, and then that'll be Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh yeah, that's true as well.
Actually, I had him in my middle tier.
Oh yeah, we're not going to like rule him out essentially, but like a guy that actually had some sort of power backstage and actually like supporting the McMahon side of things as opposed to just being a character essentially.
Yeah, let's get into Monsoon in a little bit. Yeah.
In terms of Hisashi, like that was mainly just due to the fact that WWE had a relationship with New Japan at the time. That's kind of really it. It seems like, and we'll talk about this with like Jack Tunney a little bit down the line as well, in the sense of they seem to make presidents out of people that they were trying to build relationships or trying to increase the fan base in. So they picked Hisashi because of his Japanese fan base and the fact that WWE were combined with New Japan at the time, or at least had a working relationship. And then Jack Tunney being a Canadian, they were trying to expand into Canada and decided they'd give the Canadians a familiar face to latch onto.
I didn't even know that he was Canadian.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about. I'll go into a little bit more digging that I've done with him when we actually get to him, because I assume he's a lot more likely to have at least a contender spot for this Mount Rushmore.
So, yay or nay, we can knock out Otunga, David Otunga.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll kick him out just like Jennifer Hudson did.
I think we can take out Brad Maddox.
Yeah, not memorable enough.
Yeah. Actually, it was a Brad Maddox-led segment. That was the first time I ever questioned why I watched pro wrestling to begin with. So yeah.
Was it the sex tape?
It was the sex tape. It was a really awkward highlight reel where it was like Brad Maddox, The Miz, Wade Barrett, and Jericho, and it was a train wreck that even the announcers at the time shit all over, and that's what I associate Brad Maddox with, is shit. So
I actually liked Brad Maddox, but I just think in the grand scheme of things, like, there's no debate he's not on the Mount Rushmore. Like, it's just an immediate no for me.
I genuinely just can't believe that it took you that long to just hate wrestling at that point. Just like, why question why you don't watch wrestling or anything along those lines.
That's another discussion for another day.
In the grand scheme of being not just memorable at all, Tiffany has to go too.
She was insatiable.
Much more memorable in TNA.
Yeah.
Or her TNA mainly, but other than that, nothing in ECW.
For the same regard, Armando, Alejandro, Estrada. He was better than Tiffany as far as, like, he seemed to serve more of a purpose with, like, his character was built more around it. Like, Tiffany was more of a, Taron's more of a wrestler than a general manager, but Estrada to me, I mean, he was on ECW. Nobody cared.
He had the most iconic segment ever. We've been over this already. He was the man that Braden Walker came a knocking for. And that was maybe the only memorable thing about either one of their WWE careers.
Well, he was the manager of Umaga. He was good in that role.
Yeah, I mean, he could have been better off if he would have been in a different position, I think. ECW was a dead zone.
He wrestled for a bit on ECW as well, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yes.
God, that was some dark times for the Extreme brand.
For everything.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to make a case for the guest celebrity general managers, right?
There are a couple of good ones, but as a general concept, it seemed a bit desperate. Just seemed like, oh, well, wrestling's so cool. We bring, like, you got Hugh Jackman appearing and stuff like that. It's
like, hey, remember that episode with ZZ Top? The only one that I would ever make a case for it being just the most entertaining thing ever was The Price is Right host. His name just
Barker.
escaped me.
Parker,
Oh,
yeah.
Barker. Thank you.
He was, he's probably the main one that comes to mind just for the Price is Right segment with Chris Jericho. But I think it leans on like a wider problem with WWE and wrestling in general in the fact that obviously they leaned a lot on celebrities for like the early stage of the rock and roll wrestling thing. For the most part, wrestling fans just want to watch wrestling.
Yeah.
And they don't really just want to see celebrities like who is it? It was I can't remember his name because he's so unmemorable. Is it Jeremy Piven or something like
Jeremy
that?
Piven and Ken
Well,
Jeong.
yeah.
Yeah, who's
How can you forget
Summerfest
that?
and stuff like that.
Summerfest, yeah.
It's
So if
like,
they would have actually brought Summerfest in the mix, then then they could have been part of things. But no.
it would have been fine if like all the people that came in actually liked wrestling and were fans of wrestling, but most of the people in it just were there for a payday or to promote their new movie or television show or album coming out. Just it's all a bunch of shit, really.
By the way, I don't want to get out of this without saying that's another horrible thing we have to thank the Donald Trump gimmick for, because he started that and they kept it going, and damn Trump.
So stop me if you think that there's a talking point with some of these people. Lieutenant Commissioner Deborah. Yeah.
I mean, I can think of two reasons why she'd be a good choice for this.
She made good cookies for a while.
I honestly don't think that there's much of a discussion to be had about Eve Torres as an assistant general manager. She just was what she was.
Yeah, she was.
She looked nice with the glasses on.
Yeah, it's assistant role, nothing important.
Bret Hart, to me, I didn't even remember that he did anything.
Could have been really good, but it was too brief.
Yeah. Honestly, I would throw Sheriff Steve Austin as like a guaranteed no. To me, that's just him being a regular character kind of thing,
But he was in that role for a while. I think it's worth a discussion.
Well, he was technically general manager for a while, and then when he was relieved of his duties as general manager, he became the sheriff for a while, but he wasn't really around that often. It was kind of like just again, all these ones are ceremonial things, but he didn't actually wield too much power beyond like mid 2005.
You're the damn good sheriff.
Oh yeah, it was fun to just have Austin still around in some sort of capacity when he couldn't wrestle anymore. So like from the 2003 period where he was general manager up until like kind of ending the sheriff thing without any real sort of gravitas to it.
I was gonna ask you how it ended. I don't remember it ending at all.
I don't either. It's like some of these. It's a running thing with some of these general managers. It just kind of ends, and nobody really talks about it. They don't need to come up with
where it would have stopped though, because he was big through WrestleMania 20, right?
Yeah, he was in the
Or was that it? Was it just?
I think he kind of was just
with Goldberg and Brock, and then all three of them just sort of disappeared.
Yeah, I think he kind of just went back into the background as just like an occasional like legend appearance after that point. But I can't say
the next thing I recall from him was the Piper's Pit a year later with Roddy.
And that already speaks volumes. If you can't even remember how it ended or when it ended and stuff, was it really all that memorable as like a general manager for the Mount Rushmore to me? No.
Apparently, just like as a cursory glance through his Wikipedia page, said that on April 17th, WWE announced they were unable to settle contract disputes with Austin. So the company actually parted ways with him at that point.
We could knock out Linda McMahon, right?
I mean, I wouldn't. That'd be like mean.
I'm pretty sure we can knock her out, just like one stiff punch.
Well, then we have to answer to Trump.
Well, as Stephanie showed, it just takes one slap to the face and she goes down.
I don't know. She was very good at blocking that after a while. She might see it coming.
I don't know why this has turned into a discussion about beating up Linda McMahon, but I mean, she held the role as the CEO of WWE for a long time. Yeah, and she was the real CEO of the company, but she is like such a terrible character.
Mm-hmm.
Like the one good thing she ever did was stand up from a chair.
I can't even argue with it though. That's the thing.
Yeah, I guess we can pass her, but she is at least worth saying. She did a lot for the company in a legitimate authority role.
Yeah, and it's quite funny that basically her entire political career since then has been trying to distance herself from the company she built up in the first place.
That to me rules out. I had 4 different tiers. Actually, I kind of technically had 5, but that's like one of some like subdivision. But that to me is the definitely a no category. Now I have another group that's a no for sure. Before we start getting into the ones that I would think at the very least are worth a more weighted discussion. And of course, you guys might disagree. And of course, if I bring up something like that, then by all means, let's jump on it. But moving up to my next tier, I've got Alexa Bliss and Constable Corbin, because right now we can't really judge what they're doing. And it's kind of hard to be like, all right, well, they're on the Mount Rushmore and Alexa Bliss is on there because she just looks amazing in her like formal wear. And I really like Constable Corbin in a lot of ways, but if his whole thing ends right now, I mean, well, technically next week, I still don't think he's worth being in the Mount Rushmore. But if this continues, he could very well be. I really like him in the role. And I really like Alexa Bliss in the role, too. It's just too early, you know?
I think if Bliss ends up in this role on a more permanent basis, which rumors would suggest that that's not going to be the case, then maybe somewhere down the line, if this was ever done again, we could have her on. But I'm going to completely disagree with you on Corbin. He is like the Brad Maddox of 2018. Like, if this stopped tomorrow, you wouldn't remember it a year from now.
I think this is the best thing that Corbin's done.
But that's saying a lot of how shit Corbin has been since his entire.
Yeah.
That's not a compliment to Corbin's doing really well in his role. It's just saying, wow, he's on TV a lot, and like he wouldn't be in other situations. Corbin, a lot of the factor of like Raw being so bad, I think I placed firmly at Baron Corbin's doorstep, and it's not his fault. It's what he's given, but he's on TV far too much.
I agree.
Like that episode of Raw last week, like the one that many people have deemed the worst Raw of all time. Obviously, we disagree with that, but because we've seen enough Raws to know how bad it can be. But that was a very, very bad episode of Raw, and he was on it for about an hour of the entire show, either wrestling or doing backstage segments or in the ring or whatever. It's too much. And I think that's completely tarnished any opportunity. Even if he held the role for another like 10 years, I would never want him to be on this Mount Rushmore.
I think when it comes to Alexa Bliss, in the short time that she's had power, she's already proven that she's better than Paige, which immediately makes me think Paige is a no.
Oh, I disagree with that. What was Alexa Bliss shown in the role? She hosted those 2 awful Q&A sessions with Sasha Banks and Bayley. Like,
that's the thing, though. As bad as those things are, I believed in her authority figure role more than anything that Paige has done so far. And Paige is not bad. Like, I mean, I don't want to be like, Paige is the same as when Donald Trump was doing it or something like that. But like, with Paige, I feel like that's somebody who's got nothing better to do, so she's in that spot. And with Alexa Bliss, it feels like, wow, at any point, if they wanted her to do that, she could succeed really well.
I would say that... Oh, you go ahead, Rob.
I'm going to disagree with you again. I like the way Alexa looks, yes. But I got to go with Callum here. She's done nothing in the role yet other than look good. So I think Paige is shining more than Alexa is in this role.
What I would say about Paige is something that not a lot of people talk about, because a lot of people do back her as a good GM, and that's part of that is due to the fact that it's a woman GM that's actually given like a position of power and authority, which you don't actually see very often, apart from like Stephanie McMahon, maybe in the past. And a lot of people are big fans of Paige as well, so they're going to support her, and she does very well in the role. She's very good on the microphone. She does give a sense of gravitas to things, even if I do agree with you that it kind of feels like she was put into the role just because she retired,
right,
rather than actually being seen as somebody with enough credibility behind her to have the role. What I would say about her is that she's incredibly inconsistent, but that's due to WWE's booking being incredibly inconsistent. But unfortunately, due to that thing, it makes the characters look bad, and she is very inconsistent with certain characters. Why does she give Charlotte so many title opportunities? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why was the those top 10 rankings were instituted before?
Yeah, no, that was part of the Shane McMahon Daniel Bryan era.
Yeah, but why does she give I guess with like the Samoa Joe and AJ Styles thing, like why was Samoa Joe and AJ Styles getting so many matches for the championship and Shinsuke Nakamura and stuff like that? Why weren't other people getting matches and opportunities? It just seems like she is a victim of WWE's poor booking.
And I feel like
she has to deliver it.
I feel like Paige doesn't have her own identity yet. Like, you could give her the same exact things that she does to virtually anybody else, and it fulfills the same purpose. Like,
that is true. But I give her credit in the fact that she's neutral, or she appears mostly neutral, even though she's a fan favorite. Her decisions don't seem to favor one side over the other too often, and that's my biggest bugbear with every general manager thing is that it's all heel based.
Yeah.
So to have somebody in the role who kind of just plays to both sides and does what she thinks is right, regardless who it's going to piss off, is a benefit to her character, as opposed to so many constant, just revolving door of people. Oh, we're going to screw the baby faces because we have all the power. Yay.
Although I'll spoil something ahead of time. I have 5 people for my potential picks right now, and 3 of them are baby faces. So it's kind of be interesting if we end up going with leaning a little bit more towards heel anyway, or, but we can all agree Paige is not in the discussion, right, for Mount Rushmore.
It's too early.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I would say we can knock out Dusty Rhodes too, because he was more of a behind the scenes thing to me than an actual on screen authority figure worthy of a Mount Rushmore. If you're talking like influential people in NXT, he's guaranteed on there.
He's one of NXT's Mount Rushmore. He's the George Washington of NXT's Mount Rushmore. Well, him and Triple H, obviously. That'd be quite an interesting one to do.
But as an authority figure, it's like they didn't quite have that platform yet, Yeah,
he was just like, it was kind of like when they were still transitioning away from the FCW thing, and he was just there as, obviously as a general manager, but didn't really do too much of significance in that role. Most of it, like you say,
brand credibility as they were building a new style.
Yeah.
His influence is mainly behind the scenes, you're right.
Yeah, so that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, technically if we're talking people that are influential in a power position, at least when it comes to NXT, he's guaranteed. When it comes to WWE in general, then you start getting into more of like, well, there's Bruce Pritchard and there's Kevin Dunn and there's whatever and all that other kind of stuff. But general manager Dusty Rhodes, to me, doesn't measure up. And the same thing for JBL. He was part of NXT for a little bit. Nobody really remembers it.
No, and he's never going on any Mount Rushmore. Unless it's a Mount Rushmore of absolute dickheads.
I think he could have, though. Like, he could have really excelled at a general manager role. He just hasn't.
Yeah, hopefully he never does. But yeah, he's done a good job in that role.
I put, this is, that I had mentioned, this is my number 4 tier, like my second from the last tier. I'd put Kurt Angle on there. I honestly don't think that Kurt Angle's done enough that he's even worth like that mid-range discussion. He's fine, but fine isn't good enough.
Yeah, I agree.
He's a legend to me, obviously, but I can't disagree that his run as general manager was very, very distressing. As somebody who was a big fan of his work, to see how not how far he's fallen. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't Mick Foley levels of general manager stuff, and we'll probably get to him later on because he's got a lot more reach than Angle did. But
yeah, he's my next highest up.
Angle's like first run as a general manager was mainly just to facilitate recovering from a neck surgery, and the next one was he was kind of inadequate, really.
Right. His first run was marred by what we were talking about earlier with the heels just screwing the baby faces, and his second run has just been the worst acting I maybe have ever seen. I've seen some bad acting in WWE, but like Kurt Angle really flubs all over his line. I don't know.
And I just love even like little things like when he's like, "Oh, I'm here to check out the NXT crew. I really want to see what Asuka has to offer," or whatever. Little things like that.
What did he say? Jinder Mahal?
Jinder Mahal? Is that what it was?
There's Jinder Mahal is going to fight Brock Lesnar.
Well, it's like, again, more of these stupid inconsistency things as well. Like saying, he would often say like things like, in Raw, we settle things in the ring. But then when Sasha Banks and Bayley have a disagreement, they go to counselling.
Yeah.
It's like, what? And again, it's just a victim of having to explain or at least project WWE's illogical decisions.
One big flaw when it comes to general managers and authority figures and stuff is, and this is something that doesn't get addressed all that often, but if we're supposed to assume that these people have legitimate power, why is it that so many matches get booked on a whim? You mean to tell me that, like, for instance, last night on SmackDown, we have a contract signing, and Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville come out, and then Paige goes, all right, well then you two are going to be in a tag team match against Asuka and Charlotte Flair. Without that happening, there's like a 15-minute gap of this episode that Paige didn't account for.
Yeah, it's like amazing. I always like to think of like somebody like Ty Dillinger backstage going, "Oh fuck, screwed again! I can't get on the show because she keeps making these random matches."
Yeah, being like, time. God, I had this match scheduled. She was gonna put me against I don't know,
Aiden English or something.
Aiden English, and these two people came out and they took that spot from me. I guess next week I'm gonna come out and do like. I mean, it's one of those things that like, and I find it really, really funny too when people bitch and complain on Twitter to the authority figures and complain to them about how like Monday Night Raw is and stuff. Like Foley has said that before. People will be like, hey, like Monday Night Raw sucks, and it's like, well, you do realize that Mick Foley's not actually fucking in charge, right? Like,
yeah, you might as well be complaining to Corey Graves about how much it sucks or anything along those lines, and people do that as well.
Fuck, complaining to me about how you want to change Monday Night Raw. For the last time, people, I can't change Raw to Tuesday nights or, book a pay-per-view in your town. I don't have the power for that. If I did, I'd have a lot more money.
But you're right. It is just like an amazing situation of like, it just has been there for basically the entire time that Raw has been around, that they seem to go in without having all matches booked or all the 3 hours accounted for.
Yeah, it's like we're going to set up a 15-minute talking segment to set up what our main event is going to be. Okay, well then, by that rationale, heading into this episode at 7:58, anybody on the production staff was like, yeah, so what do we do tonight? Like, and the person in charge was just like, well, figure it out. Let's go out and talk about, I don't know, TLC is a great thing. Here's a video package, and then we'll sort out what matches are happening. Like,
that's one of those stupid things that only started because of the current format, which began in the Attitude Era. Because prior to that, all matches were announced, or at least assumed that they were occurring. It was a very rare occurrence that it was like, oh yeah, well, I'm not even gonna wait. Let's fight right now. That was a very rare occurrence pre-97.
Right. I mean, you start things off with the Vince McMahon character in a certain regard about like, hey, we're going to change things right now on a whim. But it's more so when you started getting into like, quote unquote, general managers.
Mm-hmm.
And then things start going to shit. And then that's why you get people like Mike Adamle, who I think Mike Adamle's worth a discussion in general, but not as far as Mount Rushmore. He's just worth a discussion because he's fucking interesting.
It's worth the discussion. The discussion starts with this question: what the fuck were they thinking?
I liked Mike Adamle in the role. I thought that he was one of those guys that he was ridiculous on commentary, like absolutely ridiculous. And now we know why. Is because he had been suffering from like brain damage essentially. So it's like, fuck, I don't blame the guy. But when you have him on commentary and he sucks as bad as he did, booking him as a general manager was easily the best decision to go with after that, outside of just releasing him.
He was infinitely better as the general manager, mainly due to the fact that his role as the general manager was to be incompetent for the most part. And he was so good at being incompetent.
Yeah, it was really great.
But I also think it served another purpose. Like, it was proof that this role is so inconsequential at times that all you really need is a person wearing a suit. You know?
Yeah,
that
that's
is
true.
Kind of true.
I mean, you really kind of got away with it when it came to Jack Tunney. He's actually still above a different tier for me, but he kind of proved that if you have somebody come out there and it's like, this guy's in power, he can say blah, blah, blah is happening. With the Mike Adamle, it's like, let's add a new element to this. He can also be completely a joke. And then we can play the general manager thing for laughs. So then it can be like, well, the general manager in charge is not somebody who actually has power. He's just somebody who can call shots as bad as they are. And that actually extends a little bit to Jonathan Coachman. He's in my same tier. Coach was a joke. He's always been a joke.
But he was a joke because at the time when he was given a position of power, it's because he was McMahon's bitch.
Yeah.
You know, and he was just a good foil for DX to, you know, ram his head through a wall and spray paint his ass.
Yeah, he served a really great purpose when it came to being a joke authority figure. But when it come to a Mount Rushmore, I can't put a joke person on there. You know?
No. Like you say, Coach was great in the role of being just this ultimate suck-up that was just there to like appease the bosses above him and make sure he wasn't going to get into any sort of trouble himself, and then not constantly being foiled by the baby faces at every possible opportunity. And that was like a fun role for him to be. Now that when he came back and was just like a super serious commentator, realised how much he sucks at that, kind of just hoping that he'd come back to a situation where we can just take the piss out of him at every opportunity, and because that's what he's good at.
Oh, yeah.
While we're on joke characters, so are we not going to talk about Stevie Richards as the general manager of Sunday Night Heat?
I didn't even have him on my fucking list. That was the thing?
It was the thing that he was on the show so much that he began to call himself the general manager of Sunday Night Heat and wore trunks that said Stevie Night Heat on them.
God, that's changed my list now.
Yeah, I mean, shit, we're talking middle tier already.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. He'll show you. You'll see.
I would put Booker T in the no category.
I think there mainly due to the fact that when we were initially discussing the idea and I brought it up, or I think I brought it up in the past, and you said Booker T was the general manager.
Yeah,
it's
I don't remember him.
Yeah, because he came on in that weird time where it was like they had got rid of Teddy and they didn't have anyone. So it was just like, oh, hey, Booker T is the GM now.
Yeah, and I like Booker T in a lot of different ways, but that's just not one of his stronger suits.
Yeah, he was just unmemorable in the role. And the main thing that I can, the stuff that I can vaguely remember of it seemed to be some sort of struggle for power between him and Teddy Long. And it just, like, that's not really a feud that I was particularly interested in.
Let's see what else I have here on this tier. I have Sergeant Slaughter, because to me, the most memorable thing Slaughter did in charge was get made fun of by DX.
He also took quite a few Stone Cold Stunners.
Yeah, but it's kind of it, really. Like, he was just the butt of DX's jokes.
Yeah, that whole thing with the windshield wiper things, that was amazing, but you can't be on the Mount Rushmore or that for a joke.
No,
you know?
But I'd credit him a lot with making DX as popular as they were.
Yeah, it's true.
Without having that authority figure that was just so... It's not the fact that he was incompetent, he just felt kind of powerless against it. And it was a guy like Slaughter felt that he was so powerful, or at least he had the belief in himself that he was powerful in making all the decisions, and the fact that he was just constantly being like driven around the bend by DX just made DX the Rebels' favourite to follow. The ones that wanted to buck authority before Austin did.
For that matter, though, I think if they wanted to, they could have been able to get something good out of him as like a legitimate GM. Because he's got the voice for it. He's a big guy. The whole military kind of thing could have translated pretty well. Like, he could have, if they would have booked him in a more serious role. I could have bought into that. I would have actually bought into that more than Rowdy Piper.
Yeah, well, Piper, when they gave it to Piper, they were just giving it to him. Because I think Monsoon might have
He was sick or
been
something.
working
Yeah.
an injury, but it was also kind of genuinely ill, and that was a way to segue into the feud with Goldust, where he had the wonderful line, "I'm gonna put some Y chromosomes back where the X's are."
Yeah, that's a placeholder thing. It's like, Piper's great, but just because he's great in other roles doesn't mean that his spot as a general manager or president, or it was president, right? President
he
Piper?
was president, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't translate well.
It was just something for him to do before because he kind of stopped wrestling for WWE and appearing in general the entire time, and then a year later he was wrestling for WCW. So that's how things
Not
go.
even a year later, like
Yeah, I know.
6 months.
Yeah.
I think when I think of Piper in this role, I think of the promos for the Iron Man match where you just have his voice over it going 1 hour, no timeouts, no DQs, and then just I don't know. I have very distinct memories of him, but again, it's just a 2-month thing.
Shawn Michaels is on my definitely a no. He was kind of fun, but
or a commissioner.
Commissioner.
Or both.
He was deemed a commissioner, but it's just sense of like he was given the role for a bit, and it's odd how long it lasted. In the fact that in reality, it only really lasted a couple of months, but he was actually the commissioner for about a year or so.
Yeah.
It was another thing where it was like, what do we do with this guy? Let's give him a fake position of power.
But I'm going to say he would be a wonderful GM for NXT should Regal ever need to step down.
I think that, yeah, if he wanted to do something that was more on the serious side of things, General Manager Michaels could be a thing, yeah.
I mean, I would say that, but his mic skills aren't what they used to be anymore. I think the main requisite you need to be in a general manager is, well, you need to have some measure of credibility, but you need to be good on the microphone because that's what you're going to be doing the entire time. And I don't think Michaels is.
Well, a lot of NXT stuff are pre-taped, so I wouldn't put him on Raw for 3 hours, but I think he'd do good for NXT.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't put Baron Corbin on there for 3 hours, but they do that as well. So.
That's a good point.
All right, so now in my brackets that I've got going on, we're on the middle tier. These are the ones that are at least worth talking about, but I would still say no. And I think that we need to start off with one that would have had more credibility up until just like 2 weeks ago, which is Drake Maverick. This dude was really good for 205 Live, and they literally pissed all over it.
I see what you did there. Yeah, it's again, he falls victim a little bit to the 205 Live curse and the fact that nobody's watching, so who the fuck cares?
Right.
But he was good in the role. He came across as a credible, like pretty neutral, obviously still a babyface, but a fairly neutral general manager. And then they stuck him with AOP, which was fine, but it was kind of clouding the lines between his babyface neutral role and being a heel on Monday nights. And then he just became a joke, as they tend to do with a lot of small people on Raw and stuff like that.
In the role as GM, the funniest thing to me was the way he would almost beg people to watch things with the Cruiserweights. Like, if you ever watched, like, when it was WrestleMania or SummerSlam, like, he would really implore, I know it's just the pre-show, but you gotta watch it.
Yeah. it comes off a little sad, but it also came off a little bit genuine to me of being just kind of like, well, he's doing his job. Like he's kind of making it like I believed the idea that he was believing so much in 205 Live that he would want to go out there and do that. Like it was almost kind of like a worked shoot. Like I know he's not in a position of power and he's just playing a part, but if he was in a position of power, I'm sure he would want to go out and be like, guys, watch 205 Live. I swear it's amazing. And that's why I kind of like I liked Drake Maverick in the role before he became the dude who just pees on robes and pees himself. And I'm sure pisses on whatever he pisses on next week.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
too much pee is a bad thing.
Yeah, AOP. Should have just been AO. I think we need to talk about John Laurinaitis. He was pretty good in a lot of ways, but people power, not the best.
That's actually a pretty good impression. How long have you been hiding that for?
I'm sure I've done the impression somewhere along the line. I don't know.
But yeah, as a role as just a suck-up heel general manager that thought that he was doing such a good job when everyone hated him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good character to have. When you try and balance it out to the fact that people actually did hate him and it was causing people to not want to watch the show, it makes it a little bit harder to equate him as actually doing his job well, as opposed to just people really just despising him. But it's I don't want to say it was memorable, but it got some laugh value out of me and other people, actually.
It's memorable enough that when he pops up, people are like, ah, fuck. You know? All he has to do is smile and point up, and people are like, there's fucking Johnny Ace. Like,
he's one of those people that will be perennially booed. Even though it's kind of like, oh, how funny it's John Laurinaitis, but they'll still boo him because that's his reputation. It's like, oh my god, John Laurinaitis is going to come on, something shit's about to happen. It's like, that's kind of his, what he'll be known for.
The way Tony feels about Baron Corbin, I feel about John Laurinaitis. I really enjoyed him in this role, especially with just the obnoxious, like, I'm the executive vice president of talent relations and the permanent general manager of Raw and SmackDown. Like, it was funny, and he was a complete goofball, and, you know, you were gonna see him get his, because it's not like with a Vickie Guerrero where it's like, oh, she's really annoying, but none of the guys can actually do anything to her. With John, you could actually see something happen. It was a mistake that it wasn't Punk, considering the only reason he ever ended up being an on-air character was the whole CM Punk thing. But I really enjoyed it.
I unfortunately don't have an impression of most of these other people. Yeah, Laurinaitis is one of those guys that I was just like, yeah, man, if this was like a top 20 list, he'd be on there for sure for me. Actually, I don't know for sure, but yeah, he'd be at least in the discussion for that. I actually skipped over this one. AJ Lee is a no for me. She was really just popular because she was just popular. It wasn't more so about her being the general manager. It was just kind of like, AJ Lee's really a thing right now, you know?
She's very cute.
Yeah.
Just brief thing I want to cut in here. I'm watching NXT UK, and they actually threw in a crawl underneath the screen about the Dynamite Kid. That's different for WWE, and I actually think that's pretty cool.
And actually, since you just brought up NXT UK, I completely don't have Johnny Saint on my list, but he's a definite no.
Yeah.
he's on the bottom tier.
Booked a 4-man fatal. What else do you need?
Yeah, he went off the rails as far as I didn't even remember that he was a thing, and he literally just started not that long ago. So Johnny Saint's awful right now. He'll maybe grow into the role a little bit, but that 4-man fatal thing that's pretty bad.
Back to AJ Lee. She was just like the big thing in wrestling at the time, and because they didn't want her to hold the championship at that sort of stage, then the right role for her was to be in some sort of big authority situation. But I don't think she fit the role very well.
She won't ever be on a Mount Rushmore. I've made no bones about this. I was a huge fan, and it was a good role for her because, like Cal said, they didn't want her wrestling. Read her book. It's fantastic. You'll learn a lot of things about her in this role and in wrestling, but it's a no for me.
Yeah, it's going to be a no for me too, dog. I don't know why I channeled fucking what's his name, Randy.
What the hell was that about?
What, Randy Jackson is his name? Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't
Your
know.
impression of him is not as good as your Jordan Laurinaitis.
Well, if he started talking like Laurinaitis, then I could pull it off. It's a no from me, dog. Actually, I grouped these two people together because to me they're very similar in a lot of ways. Mick Foley and Daniel Bryan. They both are great when it comes to baby faces that are just kind of like, hey, look at that. They're going to turn around and change things up a little bit. But as much as they were kind of fun in some ways, they were also a little bit bland. And I just couldn't, in all good conscience, for either of them, put them on my number 1 or number 2 tier.
I disagree on Foley. I agree on Daniel Bryan.
It's
I
funny.
think
I was just gonna say I disagree on Bryan. I agree on Foley.
I agree on Bryan because as good as he was in that role, the way it ended, and even with the Miz stuff throughout, it always seemed like they were building towards something that they didn't know if they were going to be able to pay off, and it got annoying. But Foley, specifically for his commissioner run in the early 2000s, he was very good in this role. He made it his own. He had like funny one-liners. He wasn't as good in the GM role that we mostly remember with Monday Night Raw. But that's because he was made to be Stephanie's bitch, and maybe that's what you guys are more so remembering than like his older stuff where he was actually good.
I think the older stuff, it was a good like change of character for him in the sense that he was kind of a goofball with Mankind and towards the end of his career anyway, but he went full on just geeky dad mode for his commissioner role, which was fine, and it was a lot of fun, and it led to some really good segments with Edge, Christian, Kurt Angle, Triple H, stuff like that. It was fine. But I think I agree with Tony in the sense that it was reasonably ineffective, and I think any hopes of him being it were kind of killed with both his brief general manager run in 2003, which was only really to build up his eventual feud with Randy Orton, and the run as general manager in 2016, which I think was like really, really bad. Like not even like close to being good. It was painful to watch him because he couldn't remember his lines. He was completely emasculated by Stephanie McMahon on a regular basis. And even though you could kind of sense that he wanted to do something about it, he couldn't because it wasn't his place, so he didn't have any sort of control over it. It just felt like somebody who was in the role that Stephanie was using to try and get popular to start with, and then but never really wanted in the role in the first place. And it felt like, again, you could have just put any popular legend from the Attitude Era into that role and it would have had the same effect, really. In terms of Daniel Bryan, I wouldn't put him on the Mount Rushmore just due to the fact that his tenure was only for like short of a year or something or maybe just over a year. I can't remember exactly, but I appreciate the fact that he was a very consistent general manager and he was popular, obviously, because of the crowd and Yes chant and all that stuff, but he went out of his way to put people over, I think, and he played a big role in the resurgence of The Miz as a big character. Like, he did a lot for AJ Styles and other people on SmackDown throughout the years. I think he saw his role in general manager as an opportunity to not only just still be in the ring, which he enjoyed, but to elevate other people around him and support the business in that way when he felt that he couldn't wrestle anymore.
I'm actually going to cut in here. He said on a podcast with Jericho that being the general manager was really hard for him because it meant he always had to be around the ring, but he couldn't be doing what he loved to do. So there were a lot of times that he would want to do pre-tapes just so he could leave the building as fast as possible.
I'm sure he did have that side of things as well, but there must have been a reason why he took it in the first place. Besides the fact that, well, maybe the main reason was the fact that he was on a contract and so had to do something. But I think even though he may not have wanted to be there, he did his job exceptionally well.
But I do want to go back to the thing about baby faces, because we have gotten so used to the heel power drunk GM that with Foley and with Daniel Bryan and probably some other guys that we're going to talk about later, when they're not overbearing in the role, they become my favorite authority figures. And that's why I kind of enjoy Paige now and, you know, Bryan and Foley before her. I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a refreshing change of pace to not have the same exact heel story over and over and over again. And that, I mean, that might not necessarily be great when it comes to like, you know, like, oh, this person did such a good job as general manager because they just weren't something else, you know, but it's still worth a discussion to have that. I mean, by math, if I put Foley and Bryan in the no category, one of you agrees with one and disagrees with the other, then vice versa. That's already 2 no votes for Foley and 2 no votes for Bryan. So they're both gone.
Well, I was again. I'd say I was going to put Bryan's tenure was too short to merit being in that situation.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's go to. You know what? Let's go a little old school here. Jack Tunney. To me, he filled his part extremely well, but it was a part that anybody could have played. It's just more so, if you were in that era, Jack Tunney meant something. And, you know, they had a couple segments here and there where it was like, hi, everybody, I'm President Jack Tunney. We really hope that you guys show up for WrestleMania 8. Like, that kind of a thing and stuff. But Jack Tunney himself, as a performer and everything like that, he's a placeholder. He's the equivalent of just putting up a scarecrow, kind of, to me.
For me, he's one of my first yeses, because he did fill his role perfectly. And yeah, you can argue that anybody could have done it, but he was a perfect authority figure. He didn't overstep his role, and he was just there to make major matches. And for fans of that era, he's like a part of that culture, and I think he has to be at least on the Mount Rushmore. And like that, in the way that we put Sherry on the Mount Rushmore for the women, I think Jack Tunney should be on the Mount Rushmore in that respect.
Yeah, I would hold him as part of the ones in the final deliberation. I completely agree with you, Tony. Any single person could have fulfilled that role. He wasn't very charismatic. He wasn't very, compelling as a character, in the sense that, like, the only reason he got the job was the fact that WWE had bought out his promotion in Toronto, and they used that to basically buy out and run down every other promotion in Canada, essentially, to try and gain a monopoly over it. And that was the reason why he was given, well, at least a ceremonial amount of power through the president role. That, and to try and connect with Canadian audiences as well that they were trying to reach out to. But it's not who he was in the role. It was how he was used that made him so good. That it only ever came out in really, really important moments to settle a big debate or an argument or an issue with the championship, or a suspension or a firing or something along those lines. And it's the fact that he was used so sporadically makes him a valuable figure, because, oh my God, Jack Tunney's going to be saying something. This is really important. I've got to be paying attention to this. Whereas Baron Corbin or whoever in the past just makes so many proclamations a night, you can tune it out because you're going to see it anyway. Whereas when Jack Tunney said it obviously was not the most compelling guy doing it, but it was compelling television because it meant that something important was happening. So I'm more giving the Mount Rushmore spot to the idea of Jack Tunney as opposed to Jack Tunney himself.
Yeah, that's my distinction. But I'll put him in the maybes for right now because hey, we're giving him more discussion than I had thought that we even would. So I'll put him in the maybes. Gorilla Monsoon to me is in that just quite not in that same range kind of thing too. But I think that there's worth discussion about that. Like he's kind of almost on that second tier for me too. How do you guys feel about Monsoon?
So I think it's worth talking about how he got to that position and like the actual roles that he had with ownership of the WWE in the beginning. And he became one of like the forefathers that guys like him and Arnold Skaaland were always around because they were close confidants of Vince McMahon Sr. And as far as like how he was as a babyface and as the president of the WWE, I thought it worked. And you know, kind of like Tunney, but in more of the Monday Night War era, he was on TV more, but he only deliberated when he needed to. And he probably made the greatest call of all time when he just removed Psycho Sid from a match for no other reason than, well, people don't want to see you. They want to see a ladder match. So go away. And, you know, anyone who can do that to Sid, it's a damn good guy in my book.
I think it was interesting with Gorilla is the fact that he was a former wrestler put into that role, who was the first president, quote unquote president at the time, to actually be a former wrestler and somebody who could, obviously in his older age, not really do too much, but could still physically almost stand up to other wrestlers and get in their face. And he was a very outspoken person as a commentator as well. So it was kind of believable that he would take on that sort of role, especially due to the fact that obviously behind the scenes he had a position of power and authority and was actually considered to be a potential replacement for Vince McMahon as the actual CEO if Vince McMahon was found guilty during that steroids trial. So we might have actually had, in a different dimension or whatever, we'd have Gorilla Monsoon and his replacements as being the actual owners of WWE. But that's neither here nor there. It's more of a sense of that was kind of a time where the president's role became a bit more, I wouldn't say overbearing at that point, but it was more of just a general feature as opposed to the more sporadic stuff that Jack Tunney was doing. So I don't know whether I wouldn't put him on the Mount Rushmore myself, but he's worth a cursory amount of discussion.
Yeah, it'd be an ultimate no for me, but worth talking about.
All right, so we're going to take him off the list then. Corporate Kane to me is a fun character in a lot of different ways, but he's ultimately a no.
I would love a general manager to have split personalities. Like, it would be so cool to just, like, 1 week he's a babyface and the next week he or she is a heel, and then just, like, flips between the two. They could flip between them in the middle of a show, so one match they've, like, oh, we're going to give you this title opportunity, but then he switches halfway through and goes, oh, but we're going to have this special referee that's going to be screwing you or whatever. It's like, it was a fun character, but I definitely wouldn't put him on the Mount Rushmore.
Callum, you have that. Have you not seen Stephanie McMahon when she has to interact with the women over when she's interacting with the rest of the Raw roster?
Yeah, I kind of just deem that as being a cunt, but you know, that's like that's neither here nor there, really. It's each their own.
Let's see. I've got this is where we start bridging into my other tier of whatever. Shane McMahon. No for me.
No.
I don't like
Yeah.
Shane. I don't like. I like Shane because he seems to be the only likable McMahon, but I don't like him in a position of power. He just comes across as a bit of, especially nowadays, he comes across as a bit of a dick. And when he's not being a dick, he comes across as a bit like ill-informed, and like you can kind of tell in the same way that Foley and Angle stutter over their lines. Like he often just flat out forgets what he's going to say, and then instead of like stumbling around and eventually coming up with it, he just looks around to people and says, "Oh, what's my next line?" or something along those lines. And yeah, he's obviously taken much abuse over the years, so that might be a case of him suffering from that. Hopefully not, but you never know.
Well, we were talking split personality type things, and I kind of look at Shane in two different ways. Shane as general manager, who, if he's in a segment where it's like, I'm defending SmackDown as my brand and fuck Monday Night Raw, I like it. But when he comes out and he's like, okay, all right, well, this is what's going to happen tonight, it just seems a little blah.
Yeah.
Are we also accounting like his kind of roles in the corporation and owner of WCW as well into this?
Yeah, and those are fun in certain ways.
I liked the stuff where he was obviously just like the lackey to Vince and stuff like that, because he felt like he would obviously be the heir apparent to Vince, and he was the head honcho whenever Vince wasn't around. He was in charge, and he was very inept in that role, and that was a lot of fun. The owner of WCW was fine when he was a babyface. It really veered off when he turned heel. In just a sense of he didn't feel right to be the heel. Because like it started off so well with the idea of, oh, Vince has always been like this evil bastard, and Shane is like the good guy, the good son, the guy standing up for his mother, and the guy who wants to take down his tyranny, essentially. And then they just flipped it around because WCW sucks, and they wanted to take along the storyline that, yeah, WWE does suck, and they're going to try and take over this company. But we could go on for hours about how much the invasion was a bad, ill thought out storyline. But yeah, I wouldn't put him on the top thing. There are two McMahons that are more likely to be on the Mount Rushmore than he is.
Very much so. One of them being Stephanie McMahon.
No, she's not going on the Mount Rushmore.
I knew you were going to do that. That's why I set you up for that. Now, Stephanie, she is in my next tier type of thing, because Stephanie, she's just kind of carved that out for herself a little bit. And when push comes to shove, I will vote no for Stephanie, depending on who else is in the discussion. But to me, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people at the very least that I would put above her. Stephanie, yeah, one of them is. Stephanie does serve really good purposes in certain ways, but I don't want the Mount Rushmore to be 3 McMahons, kind of, or 4 McMahons. And I mean, let's just be honest, Vince McMahon's fucking going on there. So,
spoiler alert.
You know, I kind of...
Geez, Tony, God.
We know it's happening. Come on.
We haven't even discussed him yet.
We don't need to. He's on there. Stephanie, though, like, actually, I'll throw my other 2 cards on the table right now, too, with this tier. Ric Flair and Vickie Guerrero are 2 other ones that I have in the same range as Stephanie McMahon, where, yeah, I would vote Stephanie over Ric Flair, and I would vote Stephanie over Vickie. But I don't know, like how do you guys view that whole situation?
Well, I don't think Flair should have been in the discussion with Booker T. I don't know why he's up here. Vickie, I think, definitely deserves to be in the discussion.
Well, given those 3, Stephanie above Vickie, Vickie above Rick, like for sure for me.
With Stephanie, and I hide no facts about how much I dislike Stephanie McMahon, both as a character and as, not as a person, but as a business person. I see a very distinct difference between Stephanie McMahon, the mother, the person, the all of those good things, which I've heard nothing but good things about, and Stephanie McMahon, the businesswoman who seems to be very callous and lacking of a soul in any sort of capacity. But she's held the role as a big authority figure on Raw or SmackDown or wherever since 2001, really, with owning ECW, and maybe even before that with the McMahon Helmsley era, kind of portrayed as like an authority figure. So it's been nearly 20 years where we've had Stephanie McMahon in some sort of authoritative role. Like, obviously, take a few breaks here and there, and she's a really good character as a heel, but she's such an irritant. Like, she is. When Vince McMahon made the heel authority figure a really big thing, him and Vince and Eric Bischoff made the heel authority figure like a really good selling point. Stephanie McMahon killed it. She absolutely ruined this role because she did it far too much, and she made it. She was too inconsistent in it. It's not a case of where I like neutral general managers that call things either way. She belittles people either way. Essentially, she'll screw people over either way, rather than take situations as they come and decide, oh, this person is in the right or this person in the right, I'm going to have this match or this situation to resolve it. She'll punish anybody for any reason, and that just makes her loathable, and it doesn't make anybody else. It doesn't get anybody else over. It's kind of my 2 cents on it, really. It's essentially.
She's a maybe for me, but I can't say like Vince where, okay, you're definitely going on, because she's been great and has gotten people to legitimately hate her, but I think it's also gotten to a point where it's just like, go away. And it's not that good. Oh, I can't wait to see what happens next week. I'm so sick of you. And Tony, I think you'd put Vickie Guerrero on this list if I just put on a recording right now of Stephanie McMahon saying Monday Night Raw. I just Go ahead.
It's just getting to the point with me that I want authority figures in WWE, and Vince McMahon's a huge exception to this because of how big he was in the role. But I want general managers and stuff like that to be more ancillary characters that occasionally get big storylines where they have to be involved and stuff like that. Whereas Stephanie, it's all about her. It's all about her being the big deal and her doing all that stuff. If it was a slightly more toned down, or even if it was just her and she was on there less frequently, then I'd be okay with it. But it's just a case that when she's on the show, it's all about her.
Well, we can all agree, though, even if we vote Stephanie out, that she's still above Ric Flair.
She's well ahead of Ric Flair. Yeah.
That there's no comparison. Stephanie's in the discussion at the very least. Ric Flair, he was a big part of a lot of different things, but he ultimately just doesn't measure up. And I know some people will probably be like, yeah, but Ric Flair was a part of the whole brand split and all the other kinds of things. That's why I kind of put him up a little bit higher, because he served a big functional purpose. Yet, to me, just a no.
I think Austin was more important as an authority figure in the brand split than Ric Flair.
Yeah, that's true.
It's kind of sense like Ric Flair was. He feels like a big part of the brand split because he was the one that was in charge when the brand split happened. But he was only in charge beyond that point for another 4 months, if that, and then he was back to being a wrestler again. So I don't think he has anywhere near the longevity or really the importance for it, which is a shame because I think he would have, as shown in WCW for multiple times where he was president or running the company and stuff like that, he would have made a really good authority figure.
I'm glad you brought that up because one of my favorite Ric Flair moments just ever is when he's let the power go to his head, and I think Piper's in the ring with him, and he goes, "I'm Ric Flair, and I'm the president of the United States." And it's just he's totally delusional, and he was in his underwear at that point, and that's a very Ric Flair thing to me. I believe Ric Flair would be a very power-drunk human being.
So let's talk Vickie. Because Vickie she was a big deal for a while on SmackDown. And SmackDown there's no weight in my mind. I don't know about you guys, but being on SmackDown doesn't hinder you from being on the Mount Rushmore of the discussion. But I kind of feel like Vickie is disqualified a little bit because Vickie was another one of those kind of jokey sort of roles where, she overtook the position from Teddy Long and she made it her own in a lot of ways. So that's why she's definitely up there in this, like, secondary tier kind of a thing for me. But Vickie, that's a good way to put this. Like, Vickie, to me, as a general manager, it was more about getting her character over than it was about her being in a position of power in certain ways. That's not really a good way to put it. I'm struggling over a way to kind of formulate my thoughts, but I guess, like, Vickie being such a heat magnet, she was almost better as a manager than she was a general manager to me. You know what I mean? It's hard for me to, like, everything I say does not formulate the way I kind of want it to, but I kind of disqualify her a little bit from it. Not disqualify fully, but, like, I vote no in the grand scheme of things for her.
For me, she's in the discussion because of that initial 2008 run. She was the biggest heat magnet in WWE, and I think it's also worth saying she was the last recipient of man-on-woman violence in WWE when The Undertaker hit her with the tombstone, because that's how much of a heat getter she was. She was even, she caught the ire of The Undertaker, and people popped huge when he hit her with that tombstone. So I definitely think it's worth talking about.
I adore Vickie Guerrero. She was so good in her role. She was such a good character. And it's the fact that she's, in many ways, the opposite of Stephanie, in the sense that she was this dominant female character, which is great to have. Like, a female character given such prominence and position of power and authority. But she was so inept. But that was the charm of it. It was the fact that she was a heel that got screwed over by the babyfaces constantly. And that's what heels are supposed to do. It's not a case of, like, the heels always getting the last laugh and situations like that and keeping the babyfaces down until, like, once in a blue moon the babyfaces win and we're supposed to go wild for it. It's meant to be, like, a sense that they're supposed to be a bit of a joke. If they're going to be the heel authority figures, they should be the ones being made the butt of the joke of most of the time. And she was, and she sold it amazingly. She must go, like, be right near the top of the list of, like, somebody who was surprisingly fantastic in her role throughout the entire thing. Like, somebody you would never expect to be as good as she was.
Oh, for sure.
Everything she did. Like, you kind of thought when she was initially brought in, it was like, oh, it's kind of not in a bad way almost, but just a sense of saying, oh, they're doing it because of Eddie and stuff like that, and we'll give her a role on TV just to support her and stuff like that. But she absolutely flourished in that role.
I agree 100%.
And the thing that disqualifies me for her is the sense that she was easily manipulated, which I know is a character thing and shouldn't really be held too much against her. But it's the fact that when she was general manager, in reality, Edge was really general manager, because even though she was making decisions because she was in love with Edge.
That's kind of what I mean with, like, the her being a manager overtakes the general manager thing a little bit to me. She was too tied to one person. If she would have been, screwing over multiple different people in multiple different types of storylines, then maybe I'd put her just a tiny notch above. But it was really just the La Familia type thing. Eventually she did do stuff with Big Show, and she did do stuff with Eric Escobar and whatever, which is like,
Dolph Ziggler as well.
Yeah. So it's kind of like,
I like how Tony says Eric Escobar over just anybody else.
That name encapsulates everything that like Tony hated about, like, that era.
I fucking hated it so much. Eric Escobar is one of my go-to names. It's Eric Escobar, Bam Neely, Ricky Ortiz. Like, it's just, that whole section was just kind of like, fuck you, constantly. I kind of put Vickie in with like Jack Tunney and Stephanie, where I'm gonna say no, but I can understand why people would make the argument for it, and they're way up on the list for me because we're getting we knocked out like 40 something people or whatever it was already.
Yeah, so let's get to the main eventers.
All right, this one you guys are going to kind of throw me under the bus a little bit for, but I'm merging three things together just for a part of a discussion, and I know that this is like you said earlier that you don't value joke ones, Tony, but the anonymous Raw general manager. That idea, not Hornswoggle, because Hornswoggle is a guarantee no. He only popped up to be like, oh my god, and then run away. But Michael Cole being the I don't know, like the personification of the anonymous Raw general manager, I fucking loved it. I thought that Cole was amazing as this asshole that wasn't even the guy necessarily, but if they would have made it to where he would have been, then it wouldn't have made a lot of sense with like a couple times Cole kind of would have screwed himself over kind of a thing, but I really, really enjoyed that as something different. And you go like in the middle of a match, all right, a report from the anonymous Raw general manager, and people are just like, fuck. I really thought that was innovative and interesting. I legitimately have Michael Cole as anonymous Raw general manager go-to type of guy in my, like, I don't know, my number 8th spot or something. Maybe not my number 6.
I'll say this about the anonymous Raw general manager stuff. It was different and it was interesting. And I agree with you. I liked Michael Cole in that role. My thing that I didn't like about Michael Cole was the fact that he was the play-by-play guy. And so that meant that he was also doing most of the commentary work. And him being a heel doing most of the commentary work was bad. If he was kind of just a colour commentator during that time and they brought someone else in to do the other role, then it might have worked a bit better than it did. But Cole was too overbearing as a commentator, but doing the stuff with the Raw general manager I thought was good. And the overwhelming issue with the anonymous Raw general manager is the fact that there was no payoff to it, or no real payoff to it. If there had been some person coming up with and they had brought in somebody interesting that was pulling the strings, and they didn't just go lol Hornswoggle at the end, then I would totally give it merit. Other than that, but the fact that it doesn't have a satisfying end means that I can't put it on Mount Rushmore.
Were you guys always under the impression that it was just going to be Cole himself? Because I think the popular belief is that it was supposed to be Hunter.
I would have been happier if it was Cole. Mm-hmm. I thought it would have made perfect sense, and it would have been a good way of doing things, a good way to wrap it up, to say that Cole was the one behind it all along.
Yeah, that was what I wanted.
And he was protecting his own, like, biased decision making, because they know that if they found out it actually was him, they would be able to beat him up because he's at ringside all the time.
Yeah, and if they, like the times where Cole got screwed over by the anonymous Raw GM, you can kind of write that off as being like, yeah, I was trying to get you off my scent kind of a thing.
Yeah, and they could have just ended it with that Jerry Lawler feud that it found out like the night after he finally loses to Lawler that, oh yeah, he was actually the anonymous general manager, and then he gets fired from that, but he goes back to the commentary thing with his tail between his legs.
Yeah, that would have been a much better thing, and then I think that would have helped this discussion a little bit more too.
Well, yeah, definitely.
The Hornswoggle thing fucks it over.
Like, did they just do the Punk thing, and it was like, oh, okay, forget it?
Yeah, that one.
Well, Lawler had that heart attack thing too.
Oh yeah.
That was much later, though.
Yeah, but that was kind of like where people went like, oh, okay, Cole can't be like a bad guy.
No, you're misunderstanding. That was literally a year and a half later.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Wait, the feud the feud happened before the heart attack.
No,
yeah.
The feud happened before the heart attack, but it was a while after the
heart attack happened a year and a half later.
So
but I mean, that's when people because people still were booing Cole.
Oh yeah, they still.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about the GM thing.
Oh, the GM. No, that's a different story then. Yeah.
Yeah, never mind. It kind of just faded into the ether. Really, I honestly can't remember what the actual ending of that. The quote unquote ending was before the Hornswoggle stuff. It kind of just disappeared over time.
I think if I had to put money on it, what ended up happening was Punk happened, and then that brought Vince back out onto TV. So they just kind of just threw everything out the window, because then like Hunter was a full-time character, Laurinaitis became a character, and there was just no need for it.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember because I just go straight to the Hornswoggle thing, which was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the top things that they never played on was Edge and Jericho were on the tail of the GM, and like Edge destroyed the computer, and Jericho claimed he knew who it was, and they just sort of let things go. And I don't like when they do that.
I hate it when WWE books with the mentality of we'll figure it out, because they almost never do.
Mm-hmm.
It's really stupid. How do you guys feel about Eric Bischoff?
Love him.
He was amazing. He was such a good general manager. I mean, we can obviously talk about Eric Bischoff, WCW Supremo head honcho for so long, comes in to WWE as like the hug that shook the world, or whatever you want to deem it as. But as a general manager, he was such a sleazeball. It was so perfect for that era of Monday Night Raw, because Triple H was on top the entire time. So it made sense to have a heel authority figure that wasn't exactly had his back, but would lean towards him and try and make things difficult for certain baby faces. He was misogynistic. He introduced so many different match concepts as well. Like he felt that it felt like he felt Raw was like his new WCW. In the sense
for a while it was.
Yeah, in the sense that he would introduce new match types. He would try and show Vince McMahon that he was doing such a good job with things. He would take liberties with certain wrestlers. Like I said, like he would often try and like chat up and force the female wrestlers to do stuff that they wouldn't normally do, which is not a good thing. That definitely wouldn't fly in this
modern
point in time. But he was often screwed over doing it, which is the right way of doing it. And then he was beaten up all the time by Austin and loads of other baby faces. He wasn't afraid to take bumps. And I just anything that I don't want to say anything was good, because I wasn't really watching Raw at that time, because again Triple H was at the top of it all the time, and it would seem very heel dominated. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say like Raw nowadays, but it just felt like it was a platform for the heels to celebrate, and you only got sporadic good things from the baby faces every now and again. And so that's not really a fun show to watch. But Bischoff was a big innovator, and he like the Raw Roulette stuff and things like that it made certain shows a lot of fun.
And piggybacking off of everything Callum said, Eric Bischoff's decisions mattered, and unlike so many names we just mentioned with Vickie and Gorilla, anybody, that story played out beautifully, and it arced and it finished perfectly. I can tell you exactly when it started and when it ended.
Yeah.
So how do you guys, I mean, we got to eventually make a decision when it comes to who gets in that discussion. Is Eric Bischoff a potential Mount Rushmore?
Yes.
Well within the discussion.
Alrighty, he is. He's on my my potential list too, so good. Paul Heyman as well. Worth a lot of discussion.
No, he's not, because if we're just talking about general managers, his SmackDown role in all three is kind of forgettable.
If we're talking about his, I class like three things potentially if we're talking about him in WWE, which is him being part of the Alliance, which was still mainly as a commentator, so I don't know if we can really count that as any sort of authority role. His run as general manager on SmackDown was fun for what it was, but it was very brief. And again, it was kind of just a sense of him being like, again, it's another heel authority figure. He backed Brock Lesnar, he backed the Big Show, people like that. It's not really, but it wasn't really that memorable. The most thing I remember from it is like the fact that he was like offensive towards the Mexicans. It's like Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, who just like would try and push them down a lot. And then the stuff with ECW really should just be forgotten about entirely. So I definitely wouldn't put Paul Heyman as a WWE authority figure.
All right,
He's
fair
Mount
enough.
Rushmore for a lot of other things, and I hope we're talking about him again soon, but not for this.
Fair enough. I can see the argument behind that. I was, maybe a little bit of crossover in my mind of thinking the ECW stuff was more, but now that you're kind of bringing it up, like,
Well,
I don't remember him having too much to do with that ECW for a little bit and stuff. And
Well,
yeah, you know what?
Yeah, he was only in charge for like 6 months, and then he left essentially. So
and they immediately turned him heel, which is the stupidest. Whatever. I don't want to get off on a tangent about WWE ECW.
So the four that I'm going to bring up as my final four, these were the four that I had written when I was going through my list. These were my Mount Rushmore people. So I'm interested if you guys think that we should be potentially replacing one of them or what. One of them being Teddy Long.
Hell yeah. How long was this dude GM for? Like
18 fucking years, it felt like. I think it was supposed actually like 7 or something, but
he got the role
it felt like he was just a
4,
mainstay.
and I feel like he was kind of the GM until Laurinaitis, and that was 2012, so about 7.5, 8 years.
he was so much fun. It's like he became a meme, and that's just like the ultimate goal, really, of any like WWE superstar performer. The tag team match stuff was just great, and just almost it's like the sense of like you say the word general manager, he's the first person that springs to mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's especially when you think of like figureheads on SmackDown, like he's the number one.
Oh yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of different types of authority figures in WWE, but you say general manager, it's kind of Teddy Long and Eric Bischoff. I kind of equate as the main two. But he just did his job, which is probably the best thing I could say about
awesome.
it. Yeah, he just did his job. And he was very charismatic. He was fantastic on the mic. He got involved in a lot of like kooky skits behind the scenes, like being with Aksana and Crystal at different points in time. The heart attack thing, which was stupid, but that sort of stuff. The stuff with the Undertaker in the limo and interest. Like,
Yeah.
it was just like he was involved in a lot of fun skits, but for the most part, he just did his job.
He is the reason why I didn't have Jack Tunney higher, because in my mind, Teddy Long filled the part of the Jack Tunney thing and then some. Because Jack Tunney was the type of guy that it's like, can you go out there and just like be the position of power to announce something? And he's just like a cardboard cutout. Whereas Teddy Long did that, but he brought character into the mix and he got involved in other things too. Like the best way to put it up is what you had said. He just did his job. And sometimes that's better than anything else.
Yeah. It's just like I agree with you in the sense that Teddy Long, because of his charisma and like the positivity that he showed and all of the other aspects, he was able to just do his job and be part of the show week to week. But he never felt like he took precedent over the superstars that were on the show. And when it did, it felt important, or it felt like it was a big deal at that point in time. It's like, oh my God, Teddy Long's been involved in the main event story, other than the fact that he's just saying that this is going to be the title match or whatever. It felt like a bigger deal, and I kind of wish there'd been more general managers like Teddy Long. Absolutely. Or at least we have them now.
All right, so he's certainly
big
debate.
Top, he's definitely top listing ones.
I am a big fan of William Regal.
Hell yeah.
I love William Regal as well. We're getting into the good ones now.
Yeah, these were my top 4, so it's like...
William Regal, you talk about commissioner for the early 2000s, and this was a real... Like, it needed to be a big win for Regal, because Regal would only just come back to WWE and almost immediately became commissioner. And he was so good in the role because he's a person that has the authority and like the diabolical wickedness and the credibility behind him, but he's also a goofball who absolutely, and like, he doesn't just like, isn't just happy with being the butt of jokes. He thrives with being the butt of jokes. But as he's transitioned over time, especially with the NXT, he feels just such a legitimate authority figure. Feels like such a person in power that his way goes, and he's not going to be intimidated by everybody. And it's not that the wrestlers are scared by him, but they respect him so much that they'll go along with what he says. It's fantastic for NXT. One of the best selling points of NXT.
First of all, as the commissioner in the 2000s, so many memorable things. His partnership with Tajiri, Jericho pissing in the tea, the word besmirched. Like, William Regal had so many great moments. And then when they brought him back for this role in 2008, and he became the GM / King of the Ring, he was just like a power mad villain, and he really almost assumed the role of a mad king. And had he not gotten suspended for the wellness violation, that would have turned into an amazing story. And then the NXT role, he complements that so perfectly. He does not overstep his boundaries. He when he makes an announcement, when he says War Games, like, he's delivering that with real fervor, and everything William Regal does is fantastic, and I think he absolutely needs to be in the discussion.
He's responsible for one of my favorite general manager things too, which was when he was shutting the lights off.
Yeah, that's when he was the King of the Ring /
The King of the Ring thing, yeah, and feuding with Kennedy. I fucking loved that. And I remember people going apeshit, hating it. And I was like, that's the point. Like, you guys are getting worked. Like, he's supposed to be hated right now, and you are hating it because of the exact reason why. There's difference between, I hate it when, the Roman Reigns stuff that's been going on, and the Brock Lesnar stuff that's been going on, and all this stuff where it's like WWE's trying to piss you off by just making you not a fan. William Regal was pissing you off because he's sitting there trying to be like, everybody be quiet, I'm in charge, and whatever. And that's like, that heat is amazing. And
had he not gotten suspended, he was even going to be in the running for a feud with Triple H for the WWE title. So it could have been King / GM / WWE champion. And at the very least, just those matches would have been great. And he really shines in any role he's given. So good.
And there's also something about the legitimacy factor to this too, because we were talking earlier about the idea that it's funny when people go like, hey, Daniel Bryan, why did you book this match on SmackDown and whatever? But with Regal, he actually does have some power in WWE. And when he is in a position of like the head talent recruit, and he's a part of the developmental territory, and he's the general manager of the developmental brand, there's a certain like sort of believability that comes into that more than anybody else in my mind, because I look at that, and if William Regal is saying, I just signed this new guy and he seems like a really big deal, Matt Riddle, I go, well, fuck, he actually did to a certain extent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. He will be, well, he is and will continue to be a perfect right-hand man for Triple H's future in WWE. And that's saying like a big compliment to a guy that's had so much experience in all forms of wrestling and now is like giving back in such a huge way. And he just fits the role perfectly. He's got the great mic skills, he's got the authority, he's got the credibility, the longevity, and it just all fits perfectly. And he's neutral. He doesn't like Rob said, doesn't overstep his boundaries. He doesn't appear too often. When he does, it feels like it matters. Yeah, he's a great general manager.
Perfect.
And we just talked about him a minute ago, but this was another one in my mix, Triple H.
I have a slight deliberation over Triple H in the sense that he is great in NXT, and does do well as the COO role in WWE, and he will eventually be the top like male authority figure in all of WWE. But he hasn't been doing it for that long. The authority stuff I think sucks, and it sucked for the most part. The only good thing to really come out of the authority stuff was the Daniel Bryan storyline. And other than that, it's been really turgid, and it's really hampered the product. So not so much due to the Authority, but the fact that the Authority comes up on top so often, and it dominates so many episodes of Raw, especially in like the 2013, 2014 arc. It was just too much. And realistically, besides that, Triple H hasn't really been much of an on-screen authority figure. He's been a real-life authority figure, and he definitely does have probably more power than anyone besides Vince McMahon or Stephanie McMahon behind the scenes out of anyone on this list. But we haven't really seen that come to the forefront on TV, I don't think. And when it hasn't been that enjoyable.
See, I look at the Authority as the same as the Corporation, just in a different era. And not as hot because they didn't have Austin. But you do have the Daniel Bryan stuff. And you do have other kind of feuds that were going on. And you have like the Shield situation. And his work with the whole COO thing has been stretching a bunch of years at this point. So he's got a lot of experience under his tenure like that. And that's just on Monday Night Raw. I buy when Triple H is a big deal for booting out Kurt Angle on Raw, or when it's kind of like, oh man, shit's about to go down because even Triple H is here with Stephanie McMahon and they're going to, really call the shots on Raw or something like that. But NXT alone, too, I think it's worth a discussion because when he comes out and he's cutting things about NXT, we are NXT and stuff like that, it's a different type of position. And I think he's going to get only better and better and better at this going forward and stuff like that. But already, I think he's worth the discussion. What do you say, Rob? Where you fall on Triple H?
Well, yeah, I'm a huge fan of Triple H, and I think you can definitely make an argument that the Authority storyline overstayed its welcome. But if we look at it strictly just from the Daniel Bryan story all the way through WrestleMania 32, I think it's one of the last good stories that WWE told. And it had a good ending. It's just a matter of when they need a hot feud, they dust Triple H off. And that's not necessarily his fault, And again, the NXT stuff he's great with. I don't think he's a maybe for me. We have to talk about the other names on the list because I think there are others that are more deserving in this role. But I think 10 years from now, he'll be a yes for sure on the Mount Rushmore.
And the only other person I have left on my list to talk about is Vinnie Mac. So am I forgetting anybody?
What the hell did he ever do? Pass, right, Callum?
Yeah, I mean, he was on TV every now and again. Did
the
a few
announcer?
things.
The announcer?
Oh, what a maneuver! It's like, yeah, that was there. That was a good guy.
Might have put Sean Mooney on this list.
Oh, wasn't that Vince McMahon's son? The guy that ran the company for.
Yeah,
all
are
those
we
years
talking
and
Vince McMahon Senior? He should be on this list.
No, Vince is on. Vince is the first name on this thing, so
that's the thing. It's not even worth discussing. Vince is on the list. Like he's all right. It's essentially just we need to figure out the 3 other Authority figures on the Mount Rushmore because it's fucking Vince McMahon.
But since we're here, what's your favorite Vince McMahon Authority figure moment?
Oh God, it'll probably be something from the Attitude Era, but I'm trying to think of one in particular that really stands out because there's so many. I think as stupid as it was, just because of the face, because his facials are one of the best in all of wrestling. The reveal of the higher power stuff. It's just such a good visual, and again, it's something that has become a meme over time, and it's just even though it was such a lame end to that storyline, it made absolutely no sense. It was just so funny to see him get involved in that.
You could tell he's fucking loving it too.
He loves that role, and it's so clear to see that it was almost like and again, you can't say that Montreal Screwjob was planned or anything like that, but it couldn't. If it was planned, it couldn't have gone any better than it did. it allowed him to unleash this side of his character that he was probably desperate to let out for years and years and years. And it worked so perfectly that the sad thing is it works so well that they can't escape it.
Yeah.
They've never been able to do well. Obviously, we have people like Teddy Long and stuff like that have been like fun babyface general managers, but for the most part, they've never been able to escape the idea of an Austin and McMahon feud, even though it will never ever be recreated. It can be tried again, and it can get some good results, like the Daniel Bryan Authority stuff, but it will never be the same, and they'll keep trying until they do it again.
For me, the absolute peak of Vince McMahon, mainly because this is where he started to slow down and the business started to change. In 2006, he was absolutely off the rails as a character. He challenged God. There was the thing at WrestleMania where Michaels beats the fuck out of him, and then he's on the stretcher with just like the middle finger to Shawn. And maybe my favorite Vince McMahon moment of all time, DX puts in a call that Stephanie's gone into labor, and Vince is, he grabs Coachman, he's like, "You're in charge. I gotta get out of here. My daughter Stephanie has always had the worst timing of anybody I've ever known, and now she's in labor. That bitch." And it's just like, it's peak Vince McMahon, and that is why he will never be replaced on this list. He's the number one, and really, it's an effigy in his honor, and we gotta build around him, because he's the fucking man.
Yeah, it's almost a situation where it's like, okay, Vince McMahon's so far above everybody else on this list to begin with that he might as well just be the fifth name above the other four.
Yeah,
but we can't do that because it's Mount Rushmore. So,
maybe when
so
Trump
that's where
builds that giant statue of himself overlooking Mount Rushmore.
God.
Maybe.
If it was, he'd be the Washington Monument, right?
Be Mount Rush even more.
That was bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, but you know what? Fuck it, I don't care. Maybe smile. Mount Rush even more.
Say, Vince, your arms are huge.
Oh, Vince, your arms are huge. Striations. So the other three, I mean, out of our potential discussions, things, I'm pretty sure we can not put the Michael Cole Anonymous Raw GM one in there.
Correct.
And I think that we've had enough dings to take out Stephanie McMahon, Vickie Guerrero, Jack Tunney, and Paul Heyman.
Jack Tunney's still in there.
I'm keeping Jack Tunney. Yeah, I'm keeping Jack Tunney.
Oh, you guys are keeping them? All right, so I'll bump him up on my list here, which means that in my notes I've got Vince McMahon's the number one, and we need three more. Three more out of these five: Triple H, Teddy Long, Eric Bischoff, Jack Tunney, and William Regal.
Ooh. Oh.
If I'm picking, I'm saying Teddy Long needs to be one of them.
I want Teddy Long to be one of them.
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Yeah, just because he did his job.
There you go. So Teddy Long to me, and I guess now all of us, Teddy Long is our, well, we're not ranking him number two, but he's our second out of our four. Yeah.
He did his job, man.
So now we need two out of the four. It's Regal, Bischoff, Tunney, and Triple H.
I'm just thinking we've got two names already, and then if we add another two, we've got enough for a tag team match play.
Well, if 1-on-1 with The Undertaker is what you get out of the Mount Rushmore, I don't know if anybody wants to really get that.
Well, then obviously that's Triple H's role, just so he can try to beat him again.
If I have to pick between those four, if I have to pick two, I would probably say either Regal and Bischoff or Regal and Triple H over Jack Tunney. But I think Regal would be one of them for sure.
My two.
I actually get rid of Triple H.
Yeah, I'm getting rid of Triple H as well.
All right, well, by the sheer math, Triple H is out.
Just he hasn't done it long enough, and I don't think he's really had a memorable moment in the role, because his roles have led to him being Triple H the wrestler again. So I don't think as a strict authority figure he's had that memorable time yet. He will be eventually, but not right now. Then between the other ones, this is a difficult three to pick two from.
My argument against Jack Tunney is I feel like it's nostalgia more than it is anything else.
Yeah, but we always have had at least one nostalgia-driven person on these Mount Rushmores.
And we don't have to. That's not a rule.
No, it's not. It's not a hard and fast rule. But I go along the lines of with the Jack Tunney one, in the sense that, like I said, I like the Jack Tunney role almost more than I liked just Eric Bischoff's character. And I loved Eric Bischoff, but I appreciate the Jack Tunney role as more than I appreciate Jack Tunney he was the actual person doing it, because he wasn't very charismatic and he wasn't very memorable. But what he encapsulated is kind of not the perfect, but an archetype authority figure for me. Something that only gets involved when it really felt important. Like if he'd have been more charismatic, or he'd been a different person, or somebody else was in that role, then maybe it would be a lot easier to decide. The fact that he wasn't means there is more of a debate. But if I was going for the two, I'd go. My choice would be Jack Tunney and William Regal.
You gotta have Tunney on there just for the sheer historical part of it. I'm struggling between Bischoff and Regal because Regal is he's the perfect fit for the role. But Eric Bischoff as a character, GM, had so many monumental moments, like Elimination Chamber. Whenever I say those words, I go back to Eric Bischoff, pounding the lead pipe on the chamber and making those rolls, the Raw Roulette. And Bischoff is almost my true nostalgia-driven one, because he was such a huge part of Raw when I was growing up. So I don't know, man. I'm gonna grit my teeth and say if I have to pick one, I'm going Bischoff, which leaves Tony. You're the tiebreaker.
So
he doesn't want Tunney on it, so he wants Bischoff and.
Well,
Regal,
no, but
it's. So we got. By that we've got. I would vote Regal and Bischoff.
Yeah, and I
so
would
vote.
I vote Tunney and Regal, and he'd vote Bischoff and Tunney. So basically, we have to
Callum,
put
you're Tunney.
We have to put Jeremy Piven on the list.
You're Tunney and Regal, Callum.
Yeah,
and then Tunney and Bischoff for Rob.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I will say, Rob has kind of sold me a bit more on the Eric Bischoff one, so I'm willing to change to Regal and Bischoff and get rid of Tunney. So, unfortunately, you've also kicked Tunney off the list by being so convincing with the Bischoff one.
All right, that's the end. I'm stamping it. It's worth still deliberating at least. I'm gonna put on because I've been keeping track of Mount Rushmores in the past, that we've been doing secondary lists, and without a doubt, these people are going to be on the secondary list. Triple H will be on the secondary list too, I would imagine too.
Yeah.
So right now we've got Vince McMahon and Teddy Long, and then if Callum sticks with his most recent thing. All right, so then that becomes our four then, and then it's Jack Tunney gets booted to the secondary list, which would be then McMahon, Teddy Long, William Regal, and Eric Bischoff are our primary Mount Rushmore, and then Jack Tunney, Triple H. Who would the other two be then for our secondary?
I'd put Stephanie and Vickie, I think.
Yeah, me too.
Jack Tunney, Stephanie McMahon. And you know what? I'm cool with Vickie Guerrero and Stephanie doing that too, yeah. Because the only other person that I would think that would be worth really deliberating about would be maybe Monsoon or...
a laptop.
Yeah, or the Michael Cole Anonymous Raw GM or... whatever. So yeah, that seems like that's a pretty good list, I think. Our secondary list, for those who just didn't listen to the past 45 seconds, is Jack Tunney, Stephanie McMahon, Vickie Guerrero, and Triple H. And our Mount Rushmore of authority figures officially is Eric Bischoff, William Regal, Teddy Long, and Vince McMahon. I like that list. I think that's strong.
I like the list.
Hell yeah. I mean, I besmirched Jack Tunney.
Yeah, you really threw Jack Tunney out on a limb there, really. I was like,
Well-
oh, how great Eric Bischoff was, and I was so close between Eric Bischoff and Jack Tunney, and then you just lauded Eric Bischoff so much that I kind of had to just change my mind.
Well, because you would agree with me, we were children of the ruthless aggression era, and he was so good.
Yeah, he had more memorable moments as a more charismatic and entertaining individual. I appreciate the fact that Tunney was only around when it mattered, and that is something that I like about it. But as Tony said, anyone could have filled that role.
Yeah, they could have just had Vince McMahon do the announcement.
They could have
or
had
something.
the anonymous Raw general manager all along was Jack Tunney.
That would have been great
So
if
in
they
the
would have just done
80s,
that.
The anonymous pro general manager, would that have been letter writing?
It's like carrier pigeon or
yeah,
something.
carrier pigeon. Or maybe one of those newfangled cell phones we've heard so much about, like cordless telephones.
like a Paul E sized cell phone.
Yeah.
I like it.
Somebody comes out with one of those like the ticker tape kind of things of the Morse code.
I've
Shit.
received a fax from the anonymous Raw general manager.
Telegram from the Raw General Manager.
and it's Sean Mooney, or no, better yet, it's Mean Gene Okerlund. Excuse me, what was his thing? And I quote.
And then it was revealed that it was
It's Ted
who was-
DiBiase all along.
I was trying to think of an Arsenal wrestler at the time. Didn't they used to have a midget wrestling league in like the early Attitude Era or something?
You know what was
Max
it?
Mini?
Brutus,
Yeah.
the fucking barber.
Oh, it was Dink. Not even.
Well, back in that era when they used to give people extra jobs, if there would have been somebody who was on there, they would have been, my job on the side is that I'm a general manager. Like that kind of a thing.
Yeah, it would have been IRS. He
Yeah.
also does the taxes.
So that's our list. That's our Mount Rushmore, everybody. Make sure you leave a comment below. Tell us what you think about our list and what your picks would be if they are not the same as ours. Maybe you're somebody who's like, fuck it, I really, really liked, I don't know,
AJ.
Taron or something. Yeah, like it's just, you're a real big fan of Jonathan Coachman. I don't know. Either way, drop those comments below on YouTube, or if you're listening to this on iTunes and Stitcher, drop them on the comments section of the website. Obviously, keep checking the website, smarkoutmoment.com, for everything that's happening there. If you want to be aware of the next thing that's happening on the YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button and ring the little bell for notifications. I actually don't remember offhand what our next thing is, but it's probably TLC predictions, right? Yeah. So TLC predictions are coming up next after the hot tags next week. Follow the Facebook and Twitter accounts at smarkoutmoment. Keep paying attention to fanboysanonymous.com as well for everything that's happening there. I posted something recently about the Oscars, and I'm going to potentially write something up about Pokemon because I've been watching Let's Play of Let's Go Pikachu, and it got me thinking about how predominantly the article started out with me being like, yeah, why isn't Geodude part fighting? So I might end up writing something up about that. If I have the time, fucking, whenever that happens. Head up the Patreon if you want to show your support on the monetary side of things. You got a little bit of spare change you want to throw our way for any particular tier that is happening over there. It starts at $1, goes up to as much as you want. I mean, if you got $1,000 you want to give me, I'm not going to turn it down.
And you become a producer, so
yeah, you become technically a producer of the
general
site.
manager of Smark Out Moment.
And if you want to, I will have things that I quote from you, I guess. The TeePublic and the Redbubble shops are up there. If you want to buy a t-shirt or anything else that's happening there, if you're one of those people, somebody bought a pair of leggings the other day of something. I can't remember what it was. And I was just kind of like, all right, whatever. I think that's it for my plugs. So just follow that stuff and do the whole click thing, and you'll find whatever else is happening all over the place on there. Oh, also eWrestlingNews.com and all that stuff too. Rob?
Well, if you also want to do a finding and a good clicking thing, you can check out WrestleZone.com. I will be back on the news desk in 3 hours. I just got off it right now, and I'll be back in 3 hours. There's no WrestleZone Daily today, but I'll be back on there tomorrow as well. Time Killer Apparel. Buy a t-shirt. We got polo shirts. We got hoodies. I want to do more with that somewhere down the line. And check out the Triple Threat this week and all the other wonderful weeklies. Triple Threat this week is NXT 2018 Year in Review. We're talking Match of the Year, Superstar of the Year, and Future Breakout Star of 2019. So get after that, and I'm going to toss it to my favorite lad, Callum Wiggins.
Oh god, that's creepy. I'll move past it. You can follow me on Twitter at Wigmaster14. And along with all the other weekly stuff, you might want to check out the power rankings for this week, which I will be working on in due course. I'm expecting a lot of praise for people like Becky Lynch as usual, and Daniel Bryan for his fantastic promo stuff. And I assume you won't see Nia Jax on the list anymore. just I like shitting on Nia Jax. It's my thing.
It's fun.
Yeah,
it really is.
Alrighty, everybody, that's it for this episode. Thank you for listening and all your support on all the different platforms and all the different ways that you guys can support us. We will see you next time. Adios, everybody. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we're being counted out.